name, or however you like to be called by, your background, the places you lived, and what school you attend.
Yeah, so I'm Alexa Montonen. My pronouns are she, her, hers. A little bit of background on me. I was born in Dallas, Texas, and then I moved to Mexico City from the ages 11 to 15. Really opened my eyes a lot. Super grateful for that experience. And then Kansas, and now I'm living in LA going to school at Loyola Marymount University.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on the treatment of Latin people in America.
Yeah, so that I think is a very complex question that has a lot of layers to it, but so far from my understanding, I think that the entire system and kind of how we work as a society completely subordinates the Latinx population in the United States. Um, and there's a lot of contradictions, like, people, or for example, like with the government itself, it's kind of perpetuating its own problems, saying, hey, like, the need for Latinx migrants is a proven thing that the US needs for economic reasons, but yet, on the other hand, the government incites deportations and all of these other immigration policies that kind of create bigger problems. And then the whole issue of, you know, the treatment of migrants themselves and the Latinx population. It all has to do with the underlying issue of racism in this country.
So, what made you choose to study this area of topic? Was it kind of around that, or did you?
Well, yeah, so I it was actually during quarantine. During quarantine, spending so much time with myself, I always knew that I wanted to go into something law related. Um, but in quarantine, that's when I narrowed it down, and I was like, oh, like I would really like to look into like immigration law more and into becoming an immigration attorney. And then I took a introductory course to Chicana Latinx studies during my first semester, and I completely fell in love with the class. Like, I had never had a class where I felt so connected and passionate um, about everything that we talked about, and it was just the first time, even on Zoom class, where we just had the most open and honest conversations about the reality of what's happening. And it's a scary, very, very scary reality, but eventually I decided to just switch into that for my major.
All right, thank you. So, what are ways? So, moving on to the next question. What are ways issues that these people face can be improved in this country?
Well, for the entirety of it, like I've said before, the way that this issue has evolved so much of the inhumane treatment of Latinx people revolves around discrimination. And the only way to get rid of discrimination is to completely end racism itself, which that is not going to be an easy thing. Um, we've had this entire system, like government policies, the immigration system, everything is built around the notion of a white supremacist philosophy that seems almost impossible to tear down. But I don't even know the specific like things that anyone could do to help solve this issue, but what we can do for now is at least talk about it. Like, we need to create environments where people aren't afraid to speak up, where people can actually have these conversations, because they're not easy, but they're really needed, because awareness is the first step in solving an issue, and that's what needs to happen. Um, so yeah.
Okay. If you'd like to tell us what organizations have you been involved in to facilitate awareness and change, if any?
Yes. In high school, obviously, Justice Coalition, Future Women Leaders of America. But now I'm really starting to, well, especially now because my college was completely closed last year, and so organizations were all online. Some of them weren't even happening. But currently, I'm in Women in Politics, and I plan on being in a group called Mecha, which is a activist group that supports Latinx people. So I'm really excited for that to start.
Sweet. So now that you're living in LA, what has living there taught you about this topic?
That it's very real. I feel like, especially here in Kansas, in the Midwest, you don't really see it as often, especially with the issues around immigration. I mean, California, being a border country, I don't think I can say that I've seen it myself because I've never actually been near the border, but white is actually the minority in the city of Los Angeles. So being around such a diverse population, it's actually really nice because it's giving me hope, honestly. People actually push to have these conversations and they fight for what they believe in. And it's really inspiring, honestly. But there's still a lot of work to be done because it is a very open environment, and being able to have these conversations where you get real, you kind of, it can be scary because you get to the reality of things. Um, and so sometimes you're like, well, there might not be any solutions to these problems, but at least talking about it, and that's the only way to find a solution, talking.
So how has the experience in LA opened your mind to different cultures that you otherwise wouldn't have been exposed to?
Absolutely. Like I've said before, like LA is extremely, extremely diverse, and it's pretty awesome to see a lot of different cultures. But, with COVID and everything, it still can sometimes feel like still locked down. So I would say that I still have a lot more to experience and a lot more to see, but I am 100% open minded about it, and I definitely do want to explore that a lot.
I got one more question kind of in LA, but how
Hmm.
does the diversity in LA show that the United States truly is a combination of people from all backgrounds?
So, yeah. So, when you go out and walk around, you see people of all different types of backgrounds, and it, well, something that I firmly believe in, it's like probably one of the first times where I'm living somewhere and actually like consciously thinking about it and seeing it, is that where a person comes from or where they originate from does not determine how that person should be treated. And especially, I would say, being a young adult in Los Angeles, it's the first time where I'm actually experiencing that and seeing that, and just everyone being united. And it's really, really awesome.
Sweet, bro. Okay, moving on to this next question. How does the education system do a good job of including this diversity, and where can it improve?
It doesn't. Um, the education system systemically cheats out like students of color. We all know that due to one's skin color, they can be treated a certain way or differently. And that happens especially in the education system. And I didn't realize how big of a deal it was, but it's a huge deal because if, for example, let's say this has even happened to me personally before, where I'm either talking to a counselor or a teacher and it's like for a recommendation or something. I've heard like lots of different stories, but most of the time students of colors will be shut down from taking the higher level course, or the counselor will be like, you know what, you need to stay in the lower level course or something, or they'll recommend other things. And then that will just limit the student with its opportunities in academic success. And then there's the whole issue with microaggressions in a school environment, because with stereotypes and everything, for example, how do I describe this?
What was the word that you said? Micro oppressions?
Microaggressions.
Okay.
Those are basically like little comments. Like, for example, a teacher tells one of his black students, like, oh, you must be a really good, like, track star or basketball player, just based on the stereotype that black people are good athletes. So, how do I... And most of the time, microaggressions are, like, people don't say them with the intention of hurting people, and that's why they're called microaggressions, because they still do damage. They still perpetuate racism, but it's in this micro sort of not as noticeable way. But it still upholds the foundations of racism. Anyways.
Do you have maybe any suggestions of where the education system can be improved, or maybe how it can be improved?
Definitely the biggest thing by incorporating ethnic studies into classrooms, not even college classrooms, but starting from middle school, high school. And really rewriting like history textbooks and having teachers actually say the real deal of what happened, like explain colonization and how that started up until the way that we are today. Because if we eliminate that history, this entire narrative of how racism came to be is gone. And so how are we supposed to try to fix something when people can't even understand it? And all that starts with education. That is why education is so essential, because it's the foundation for solving problems, figuring out what to do. And honestly, having teachers cultivate a classroom where people are not afraid to speak their minds, and having a classroom where these hard conversations can be discussed. Especially with history. I think that understanding history and the real history would do wonders. Absolute wonders. Yeah.
We just want to talk to you, like, if you could just talk to us about, like, how have you advocated for women to take more of a leadership role in whatever society it is, or just in society? And how important is it that women do this? And what do you think is the reason behind it?
Yeah, so reasoning to destroy the patriarchy. And I think that the biggest way that I encourage women to become leaders, and even with myself, is just supporting one another, because no one else will do it but us. Like, we are the only ones who understand the oppression that women have been through since the beginning of time. So we're the only ones that can actually do something to fix it, and we have to. And sometimes we can't, because of the system that's constantly been denying us the same opportunities as men. But through women supporting one another, encouragement, just putting ourselves out there and fighting for it, being activists.
All right, so now we can kind of touch base on kind of your life and mainly your cultures that you've experienced and any cool stories that you may have. So if we don't mind you asking, kind of, what kind of cultures do you identify with? What kind of cultures have you experienced around?
Yeah.
What are some cool stories that you want to share with us?
Okay, so I would say the biggest one for me, just because I also lived there, would definitely be, and I'm studying it, my Latinx culture. It's a really big part of me, and I honestly didn't appreciate it until I came to terms that I embraced it and that I loved it so much, especially living in Mexico. Like I've said, that completely opened my eyes in so many different ways. Not only with the culture, but with the world as well. It was the first time that I was kind of exposed out of my little bubble that I was used to, suburbia, Dallas, Texas. Like, moving to a big city it's just rich with culture and people and pride and family too. Family is a huge part of Mexican culture that I had never experienced, because another part of my culture, my dad's side, he's from Finland, and I have also visited there ever since I was a kid, so I heavily identify with that culture as well. But I've never gotten the chance to actually live in Finland. But with both cultures, I think all around, like, family is everything. What else? The language too. Yeah. That is something that I really liked, and I'm trying to think of any stories. It's just one little example, but I remember for the first time shocker, but the Cinco de Mayo is not Mexico's Independence Day. It's actually on September 16th. Cinco de Mayo is the Batalla de Puebla, which was the end of which war? French-Mexican War, yeah. So the actual Mexican Independence Day is September 16th, and I remember the first time that I experienced that, I never experienced anything like it. So first of all, at school, we got there, and it's just this whole day planned out with celebrations. People, like, with the Mexico flag everywhere, like, people have their entire face painted, and this is at school. And you would have el grito, which is like when you ring the bell, and like, who would do it? Like, our superintendent, Diego. It was the best thing ever. And everyone would scream. And then I remember later at night, my best friend at the time had invited me to Like it was like a little like celebration party at um, this club that she belonged to, and there was food, there was dancing, the music, just the colors everywhere. I'd never seen like people have such pride in their country and their culture, and it was beautiful. And I will never ever just forget that day where I first experienced that. And I think that that's the first time where I started to fall in love with Mexican culture, and I started to embrace it as a part of my identity. And I will never take that back ever.
Yeah, bro. That's sweet. Okay. Kind of have three more kind of subsections.
Mm-hmm.
This is great, bro. So next thing we want to kind of do is obviously totally up to you and totally comfortable with what you want to say, but
Yeah.
we'd love to give you the opportunity to give your thoughts on the current world humanitarian crisis or a humanitarian crisis. For example, we have the crisis in Afghanistan, Lebanon, Haiti, Syrian refugees, wildfires in Turkey, Greece, and Algeria. Do you have any thoughts you'd like to share on those crises?
Yeah, absolutely. Personally, it's terrifying for me to, and I think I can speak for at least a lot of people like my generation. It's terrifying to anticipating and knowing that we are about to watch a. I really want to say this word, but I really shouldn't. Let me think of another word. we
can cut it out, but
okay. Yeah, it's like we're about to watch a shit show happen, and we can't do anything about it, which absolutely sucks. And it's just like I don't think people realize how, and I can't even come to begin to understand how bad the situation actually is in other countries because I'm not the one living in them. And with a lot of the research that I've done, I've come to notice that it's really hard for people to want to take action, to want to help, to want to fight for whatever that they're fighting for if they don't understand the reasons why. And like for example, right now we see people are trying to flee Afghanistan. Like we know people held on for their lives onto a plane just to get out of there. I've seen videos of people like throwing babies to the front of like this airport that was gonna get out of the country. And I don't think people realize how terrifying or how bad the situation is that people are willing to do anything to leave. People would rather die than stay there, which I don't know how we can fix that with being so far, but what I do know that what we can do is number one, talk about it. Because if we raise awareness about this entire thing, that's how we try to come up with solutions. And I don't have those solutions right now, but if we keep on talking, we could create those. Oh yeah, it's this whole thing about, because I remember seeing recently that I think Texas was going to implement a policy that they would completely rewrite history that would like eliminate some crucial parts of like history of colonization and slavery. And because people are afraid that if kids learn the real history that they're going to become anti like American. But that's not the case, and that's the complete opposite of what would happen, because if we don't learn this history, like how are we supposed to understand like the oppression of an entire group of people that still happens today? The Black Lives Matter movement, I know it had its uprising like last year, but that's still happening, and it should still be happening. And if we don't understand the real history of what actually went on and how we got to this point, nothing's going to change. Discrimination will still be happening, and that can't happen.
We would love to hear your take on the United Nations, also known as the UN, of course. Is it effective? In what ways does the UN make a difference? Why do countries go against international law? I'll repeat these questions again as we go.
Yeah.
how important is it, and what impact does it have on people?
Okay. I am an international relations minor, so I do know a little bit about this, but I'm still in the process of learning a lot more. And I do wish to inform myself a lot more about the United Nations because I think that that is the one international authority that every single person has to abide to in this planet. So I think that it has a really crucial role in upholding human rights, and it needs to keep doing that. Like, human rights is a universal right that no one, absolutely no one, can be denied. And I feel like the United Nations is the place to go to and upholds those universal human rights. So I still have a lot of informing myself to do and more learning about the United Nations, but I'm here for it.
So next, we'd like to know your take on our message. So Diversity for Change KC was built on the belief that we should accept everyone from every background, embrace our heritage, and welcome the diversity around us in the world. We encourage you to view this message from your own unique perspective, shape it how you envision it, and use it to make the community a better place. So what's kind of like your take on it?
My take on it? I love that, especially in a place like Kansas City that's really, really growing and that I personally think needs to talk more about diversity. And I think that we're getting there, but it's clubs like these, stuff that you guys are all doing, that I know it doesn't seem like you're changing the world, but just having open conversations, talking about it, upholding it, like, that's a big deal. And it's every little one step that you all can take to make this world a more inclusive and better place for everyone to be happy. So you all are doing good stuff here. And I think it's really cool that in somewhere like Kansas City, this is happening.
Obviously, feel free to add whatever you feel. And we really appreciate you for doing this.
Of course, I love talking about this, and I have been on my summer break for a couple months, so I am a little scratchy on my facts and retention from everything that I learned last semester, but I'm really excited to keep learning more and just advocating for people who, because I feel like we take for granted a lot of the lives that we live and everything that comes with white privilege. Because me especially, like, I look white, but I have this whole nother side. But I still do experience white privilege, absolutely. But there are also other parts of discrimination that come with being a Latina that I also experience. So it's kind of like I get the both plates, but I really want to advocate for people to at least take a shot at the life that we all take for granted. Just having that shot. So, yeah.